This week in comic books, I'm going to tell you why Sinister Sun is just my favorite read right now. It's just great. The artwork, everything in it, perfect. Also, in the lands of Marvel, we get Night Thrasher, but it doesn't feel like Night Thrasher. We'll talk about that. And I got some really cool independents I want to share with you as well. That, a few other comic books, but first, I have a new advertisement for you. If you don't know, every now and then I auction off some comic books. Check it out. Alright, so yeah, my comic book auction is back up and running. Still plenty of books up there. Great reader copies for you, along with some other treasures in there. There's an Ultimate Fallout 4 in there. Pay what you can to get it. Alright? That and a load of other comic books. But that's not why you're here. We're here to talk about this week's comic book haul and review. So let's kick this off with Sinister Sons. I went with this cover because once you see the cover, it is just beautiful. So this is in the same vein as the Super Sons run, with Jonathan Kent and Damian Wayne, them as younger heroes figuring it out, right? This, we take it from the villain's perspective, dealing with General Zod's son and Sinestro's son. So this is fun, and this is why I had to get this comic book to begin with, right? This cover here of the guy on the front, and then as you open it up, right, it reveals, oh, it's just both of them sitting on each other's shoulders like they did in old the Rascals type movie, or Huey, Dewey, and Louie, that kind of aspect, right? Trying to pretend to be adults. So why is this comic book so great? So as great as the Super Sons run was, the whole thing there was, living in their father's shadows. One wants to forge his own way. The other one's kind of cool with his dad. We take that and we put it in a more villainous aspect. And honestly, it's just more comical. Like, I thought they would just pretty much do the same thing. There'd be some great life lessons, blah, blah, blah. But I think they're going to slightly take a different route in this. As Sinestro's son kind of wants to rule the universe with his dad, and General Zod's son, well, he just wants to take over the world because he recently got kicked off his own planet. His dad booted him. He said, you got to go find your own way. So, and this is going to be their first team up and meet, and I predict great things for this. The artwork in it is what you would expect from a Super Sons type series. Great. I love this type of artwork. The story's going to be fantastic. The synopsis is just what I told you. One's trapped on a planet and trying to get off to meet up with Dad so he can rule the universe. And the other one, of course, has got kicked off. And, of course, just like any other good comic book story, they're going to start off as enemies and then realize that they have a common goal. It's great. It's great. Go get it. If you were like, it seems like a kid's story, it is. And it's still fun. So definitely show it some love. Check it out. All right. Moving on. We got Action Comics number 1062. This is part 2 of the Bizarro story that's going on. And everything is popping up Bizarro in this. So everybody's being infected with this spell that Bizarro found. And right now he's trapped inside of Superman at the same time, trying to get out. And of course, Superman's suppressing it while he's still trying to take care of everybody. But there's this kind of mob mentality that's being taken over right now, where everybody hates Superman because it's Bizarro, right? What they used to like is now the opposite. And it's a great depiction of mob mentality in it. Like, I hate, so we should all hate. We want this back, and they all want Bizarro back. And it is just a mess. And even some of the other Justice Leaguers are trying to help contain all this, but it looks like that's not the case. With a surprise appearance, what happens when the Bizarro curse takes over the Joker? He becomes the most sane person in the whole group. Yeah, he came out just looking like top nines. It was fantastic. It was a great little twist and a great little spin in there. Happened to go to the Joker for help. Great story. Again, loved it. I'm following this arc right here. All right, next from DC, we get Sandman. So I've been loving these kind of noir retro type covers that have been coming out with it. Been enjoying the story too, and man, I thought something. Like I thought maybe, it's Sandman's good friend. The one that's being a little over nice in it. That's gonna be our villain. That's gonna be our villain. And no. They switched it up to the war hawking colonel and got a recording of him confessing, it's okay to dump a few lives to get the war kicked off and going, and then we can use the deadly gas to kill everybody. And then come to find out, I was right to begin with. Yeah, he is just a little too nice. His friend is actually part of the whole conspiracy to get these deadly drugs to just drop bodies all over the world from somebody who does not want to kill everybody out there. So now Sandman has to break and break those ties. First, he's got to disconnect from wanting to kill people and the whole war thing, and had to kind of almost do a little treason work for the right thing to happen, not justifying treason. I want to make that clear. Treason bad. But in fictional fun land, it's okay. Right? So now he's got to kind of break that tie. I think this is a good story about just having to break away those ties that sometimes you're just a little too connected to or a little too reliant on. And sometimes you just got to break away and do your own thing. And in this one, he has to break that bond with somebody that knew his father and has taken care of him and been close to him. But secretly, he's a douchebag, so you got to go. That's a good story. I liked that. That was very, very smart. Jumping into Marvel. So here we go. Night Thrasher. I know there are huge fans out there of Night Thrasher. I can think of one right off the top of my head. I've even made Night Thrasher skateboard for another friend of mine. So I'm a Night Thrasher fan. And I know he hasn't really been on the skateboard in a while. He kind of broke away from that. He was just like a regular superhero, had a couple of teams. And all this kind of gets brought back up in the new storybook too, right? It's kind of telling you, hey, he was a part of this team, this was his original team. Like they kind of go through that for you. And his family's foundation, a charitable foundation, apparently he's like, okay, dad's dead, everything, we got to shut it all down. Like, this thing is just a nightmare. It's time for all of it to end. And, of course, his sister's like, oh, no, is that really the best thing to do? And for some reason, some local politician is trying to convince him to keep it open. And I'm sitting here like, that's not your job as a politician. Like, it was kind of weird the way they just randomly threw this council member in there to try to convince him to keep his charity up and running, when the fact is that charities only exist where political services come short. It's kind of a slap. Anyway, I'm not going to get it. We're not getting political. Just going to leave that one alone. In the meantime, there's a young gang of thieves out running around tearing up stores, which for some reason the politician thought that it was, hey, they're not causing any harm. They're just stealing from small business owners. I'm not getting political. Like that's not a... Anyway, so come to find out, our guy Night Thrasher realizes that this kid fights really weird. The kid tries to catch the kid while he's stealing something. The kid's got some ninja moves, and he's like, wait a second, these are my moves. I know these moves. So he goes underground and finds one of his old teammates. Rage is kind of leading the group, affectionately calling himself OG now, which came off weird and cringy in it, and they pointed it out. Thank goodness they did. That way I'm not hurting feelings as I review a comic book. So, I don't know. For a first issue, I thought this was weak. I did. Way too long on Night Thrasher being back and everything shutting down. The whole council member thing was weird to me. I was like, why is this even part of the story? Like, this is not... You could have taken this and flushed it down the toilet. And I get the cause, right? Everybody's trying to help Harlem, right? The city of Harlem. And, it's still weird. It's still weird. I don't know. It just struck me as weird and odd and kind of cringy. But there's a story there, so I'm going to maybe follow this down. I don't know. Depends on what else comes on the list when it comes out. I don't know. I don't like a lot of politics in my comic books. Every time I see a politician in there, I'm just like, oh. Unless they're the bad guy. That's based. All right, here we go. That was the only Marvel I picked up, by the way. So we are moving fast through this. It is Valentine's Day, by the way. Happy Valentine's Day. Let's jump into our independents. I found some interesting things, a little off-the-cuff type things. I was surprised my comic book shop had them. But the first one is the Infernals. This is the sleeper this week. This is a crazy sleeper. Because it's crazy, stupid good. So here's the deal, right? The Antichrist is born here on Earth. Yeah, we're going biblical with this. This is a heavily biblical comic book done in probably the most scariest way you can do. And he's been on Earth for a while now. He even had some kids of his own. Got 3 kids out there running around, and they all got like little specialties, right? Like one helps famous entertainers and stuff like that, and one kind of creates guerrilla warfare tactics, and the other one, well, is a teenager and does bad things in schools. Yeah, it's the Antichrist. There's no hiding from that. So he gets cancer and is gonna die, and Satan's like, all right, he's taking over, which is weird to me, right? That like he could get cancer and die. So he's going to get this cancer and die. And now he has to pick a successor. So what do you do in this type of story? Well, you make a competition out of it. Like who can do the best at this particular thing and do the worst at it. The best worst. That sounded odd, but I think it's correct. Right? So that's where you're going to go with this. And then the story ends with your typical Silicon Valley douchebag giving a BS presentation that you've probably seen, heard 1,000 times out there if you've seen any of them talk at a boardroom. Possible investors is kind of the feeling that you're getting from this about how to save the world with their technology. And then he turns around to address the group and his goodbyes, and it's like biblically accurate angels. Like one's got all the eyes scoped around it, right? And like it's creepy. Like they're not like, oh no, they are. That's all I got for you, right? It was creepy, right? And this whole story is creepy. There are little tidbits of here and there just to kind of, well, one, right? You know you're dealing with the Antichrist instead of somebody thinks they're the Antichrist, right? Like there's a talk with demons and stuff like that. So it's like, this is very dark and very, I don't know, weirdly entertaining at the same time. So I found this very interesting. Very interesting. Not enough to get my pick of the week, though. I know. The next kind of odd one that I got was this one called Displaced. I went with this beautiful cover here, not really knowing what the story was about. Read through it. Our story takes place in Canada, Ottawa, more importantly. And one of the little, I'm going to go ahead and say towns, cities, towns. I'm not sure what it was. Doesn't really matter, gets swallowed up. And the people that survived it, because they were outside of the borders during the swallowing, I guess is what we can call it. I don't know. You tell me. It gets swallowed up, and the people are like, recovering from this kind of sinkhole event. And then all of a sudden it closes back up. And people kind of start forgetting that this place exists, except for the people that escaped it, right? And there's this kind of old guy that kind of came off crazy, trying to stop, people from going into the town when they were already out of it before pre-swallow. This is going to be awkward as all get out. Anyway, so pre-swallow, tries to keep the people out of it, kind of understands, tries to tell people what's going on with it, but nobody's listening to the crazy old man until... right? It never existed. And now it's like, hey, this kind of stuff has happened before, and now we're getting led into the story. So for a quick startup and in the beginning phases of our story here, I thought it took too long, right? And there's a lot of reliance on knowing where places are in Canada. Like I don't know this particular place. I'm not even sure if I can pronounce the name correctly, so I'm not gonna try because I know it's indigenous and I don't want to be rude and say an indigenous name because that's not cool. So like I even tried to Google translate it and it came up with like 3 pronunciations. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. But I will say I wished it was something that would make me want to hook onto this story even more. You know, a town disappearing and being swallowed up and people remembering it. Okay, yeah, but I don't know if I'm really interested in that kind of story. No, I'm not. Okay, moving on from Silverline Comics. Here's a weird one for you. Trumps. Now don't go getting all mad and hitting the cap lock and thinking that you're going to yell at me about something. It's not that kind of Trump. All right, basically this is kind of using heavily verbiage from cards, right? So you have a kingdom, well, a world. We'll say a world. And it's called the deck. Get where this is going already? Yeah. And in that, there's 4 kingdoms. Right? And then in that, right, there's a hierarchy. Trump cards, right? And the kingdom that's in charge are called the Trumps, and everybody's trying to beat the Trumps, right? That's the case here, so they can be the Trump, and blah, 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 back and forth, back and forth. Very high action. This is basically Game of Thrones meets kind of a weird Lord of the Rings, and everybody's kind of gimmicked off of a card. Honestly, I thought the card trip was a little too much. Like, they leaned into that way, way, way too much. And I don't know. I just didn't really connect with me in any way. Yeah, there were some cool battle scenes. There was some cool magic woo-woo stuff going on. But I don't know. I just couldn't get past every other panel had some sort of pun with a card reference to it. And I was just like, okay, it's too much. It's like being around that uncle that doesn't know how to communicate with people, so they just use dad jokes all the time. I think there's somebody like that in my family. Because if I can't think of somebody, it means it's me. Okay. Last but not least, I know y'all been waiting for it. I know you know that I got it. Transformers number 5, pick of the week. Blow it up. Boom. Okay, so yeah. This starts off very heartfelt, and I love the way that they did this. They didn't use it as a tool necessarily, just more of a here, you need to know this kind of thing. In the beginning, you start getting several panels of our boy Sparky and Optimus Prime in different aspects of their own wars that they've gone through, right? And you get this for about 2 pages, roughly. And then just a quick, so that was my war, how long were you there, blah, blah, blah. And then, boom, we go into the story. I thought this was very important to do in this story. The story is going to be relying very heavily on, combat-affected people still fighting a war. Okay? And it's been kind of reliant on that for a while now. But in this one, you finally get the 2 soul soldiers. Okay, we need to figure out how to work together, how to get along. Boom. Right? Different wars, but war's war, right? I liked that, and I thought that probably spoke the loudest in this book, because as you go through the rest of this book, it is just non-stop action. We're fighting over power, who can get their armies up first, the Decepticons or the Autobots, and it's the absolute carnage that consistently happens in this comic book is just absolutely... It engages the eyes, it makes you focus, and you start reading it. So as each of them start reviving their own troops back and forth in this, let's just go ahead and say the Decepticons are winning because we see Devastator in this. The Destructicons, 5 construction type vehicles that are bad guys that can transform into one Devastator. And I thought they did a fantastic representation of those guys in here. I mean, you got the bright green that looked like it was just great, and just the action throughout this and just the non-stop, it was great, and it was refreshing. It was 2 pages of heart, so yeah, I'm gonna be a little mean for a second, but we'll be all right. If this was a Marvel comic book, that beginning panel, the two guys, all that would have been dialogued out and would have been 5 pages long of them sitting around while drinking coffee or something inside of a coffee shop. That's what Marvel does now. And this one, you didn't have to say anything. Show a couple of panels, end it with some short sentences, and then launch it. And I promise you, it still had the same heart as fictitiously trying to pump it and feed it to somebody. I thought that was great. And that's why it's my pick of the week. Not because nonstop action in it. It knows when to stop. And I thought that was great. So that's my comic book haul and review this week. Again, my auction is live right now. It will start closing on February the 15th, starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You will still be able to bid. There is no sniping in this. The timer resets after each bid. According to Virginia auction laws, that's the case. So definitely don't get, auction fever. No auction fever, right? You spend what you can afford, right? And if you've seen any of the books that I've read over the last few that I'm not keeping, they're in there. So some things I found in auction, some things I had duplicates of. Ultimate Fallout 4 is in there. X23 books in there. Bunch of stuff, but high end, low stuff, something for everybody out there. If you have any questions, you can always DM me over at Pocan_Joe. But definitely read in there. There's things like a 15% buyer's fee. That's a fee that happens. Shipping will be handled through a third party. That has to happen. And or if you just want to contact People's Auctions directly, they will welcome your questions. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day. If you forgot Valentine's Day, you go run out and grab her something. Grab her or him something. Go grab a guy something. Chocolates. I got a chocolate tin over here with Batman chocolates in it. So that was really nice. All right, guys. Anything else before I go? I may do some lives this weekend over at the Evil Lair. Let y'all into the Evil Lair while I'm working on this Damascus project. So, if you're out and about and that notification bell's turned on and you get a ring and you want to swing in to see what I'm working on, definitely feel free. I've been sick this last weekend, so I got a lot of work to catch up on. So, I better go get to it. I'll talk to y'all later.